All right, hello MUCT 112L class. This is your midweek lecture for week 7. All right, let's go ahead and start with some warm-up. We're going to go through some of the Berkowitz today. Let's warm up on a couple of scales. Let's start with major, 2, 3, 4. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Let's go to natural minor. Ready, go. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, le, te, do, te, le, sol, fa, mi, re, do. And one more melodic minor. Ready, go. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, te, le, sol, fa, mi, re, do. All right? And let's jump right into the Berkowitz book. Remember, in Friday's class, we talked about the outline of the 5 chord. The outline of the 5 chord, if we're in bass clef C major, that is sol, ti, and re. And as you remember, sol and ti are 2 of the most important solfege syllables in this scale. Sol because it establishes the dominant tonic relationship, sol, do, and ti because it establishes do as the tonic by virtue of its half-step relationship with do immediately above it. Okay, so these are very, very important syllables, especially sol and ti. And on Friday we spent the first half of the class singing through pairs of examples, one major, one minor, that dealt with the outline of the 5 chords. So now we're going to go on past that. We're going to go to where we're going to begin where we stopped on page 31 in the Berkowitz. So get your Berkowitz books out and let's get to page 31. And from 136, which is where we will begin, from 136 we're going to start adding all of the chord outlines that we've dealt with so far. So that's 1, 4, and 5. Okay, those are now all in play. There's not a guarantee that all 3 will be used or all 3 will be used in complete form, but all 3 are game to be used here. So here we go. 136, you will notice that we have 5 sharps in the key signature. Looking at the first and last notes, we can see that we are dealing with tonic triad in the key of B major. Alright, key of B major. Alright, we begin on sol. This is just a tonic triad to begin. It's largo, so we will go very slow here. Okay, I'll give you one subdivided measure. 1 and 2 and 3. Sol, mi, do, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi. Do, sol, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi. Sol, do, sol, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, ti, do. And notice the last three notes there, especially beats 2 and 3 at the second to the last measure, is sol, ti, do. They inverted it, but sol and ti, those 2 most important syllables, sol, ti, do, getting us to where we needed to be. Okay, let's go on to number 137. Okay, actually this is going to take us around the circle of fifths. Do, do, to E, it's 1 key away. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do. That's more or less the key of E. Number 137, mäßig. Notice that we begin again with the tonic triad. To the tonic triad, but note in the second to the last measure we will deal with the outline of the 5 chord. Alright, do, sol. Let's begin. I will give you one subdivided measure in 3. 1 and 2 and 3. Do, sol, mi, do, la, sol, mi, do, re, do, ti, do, sol, mi, do, la, sol, ti, re, do. All right, as you can see, we had outlines or potential outlines of all three of the chords we've dealt with. Of course, the do, sol, mi was very obvious with the one chord, but the do, la, missing its root, but that's very possibly the outline of the 4 chord, and then of course, sol, ti, re, the outline of the 5 chord. Okay, let's move on to number 138, D minor. Let's go to the piano and get D minor. Alright, it's the key of D minor. Sol, do is how it begins. If we analyze this, we see that it appears to be, at first, harmonic minor mode because it has le in the 2nd complete measure and ti in the 4th complete measure. But if you look to the 6th complete measure, you will see that it has le and te, so this is melodic minor mode. Sol, do. Okay, not too fast, not too fast. I'll give you 3 beats subdivided and we'll be in. Let's do the dynamics too. 1 and 2 and 3. Sol, do, re, mi, do, le, sol, do, fa, mi, re, do, ti, do, re, mi, re, sol, do, re, mi, do, le, te, le, sol, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, do. Okay, and see that we had the anacrusis there. The anacrusis there, the pickup note, pickup to the first measure, a beat 4 pickup, and in the last measure only 3 beats because of the law of conservation of the beats. Let's do one more. Let's do one more. 139 on the next page, page 32. We're in the same key. Okay, and here we start with an outline. In the Allegro giocoso, we start with the outline of the 1 chord. Mi, do, mi, sol, do. Okay? Let's take it a little less fast. This is a good classic melodic minor mode as well. Let's give this one a try. 1 and 2, E and do. 1 and 2 and mi, do, mi, sol, do, te, le, sol, le, sol, fa, mi, re, ti, sol, mi, do, mi, sol, le, fa, do, sol, fa, mi, re, do. All right. Okay, let's move into the Berkowitz. Let's go into the Berkowitz book. And get yourself over to the Berkowitz book, please, in, let's see, on page 52. 52. Okay, for those of you who had to leave with the choir on Friday, we did number 85 on page 50, all the way through number 89 on page 52. Okay, we dealt with measured tremolo, okay, which we did discuss briefly before you left, but just a review. Measured tremolo, okay, is a system by which you have a note value, a standard note value, a quarter, a dotted quarter, a half dotted half, whatever, and you put a number of slashes through the stem to indicate a number of tremolo or repeated notes. So, for example, if we were to put 2 slashes through a quarter note, 2 slashes indicate a note that has 2 flags, that is the 16th note. And it indicates that you should fill the note value, the prevailing note value, which is a quarter note, with as many 16th notes that fit inside. That would be 4 in this case. Okay, and another example would be a dotted half note, which normally receives 3 beats. If we were to put 1 slash through here, we know that 1 slash or 1 flag refers to 8th notes, and so how many 8th notes fit into a dotted half note? 6, a total of 6. Okay, so it's just math, and it's a way of writing shorthand when there are a lot of repeated notes. But we're about to experience one odd little wrinkle on this, and actually nobody, we didn't talk about this at all on Friday, so this is kind of the new part of the concept. What we've already dealt with prevailing note values that have just a single, that are just stemmed. There are 2 ways that you can go kind of outside of this system. What if you were to want to indicate measure tremolo on a whole note, something that doesn't have a stem? So what do you put the slashes on? Well, you can do that as well. You can do that. Sometimes I've seen it here above the staff. So it indicates that as many 16th notes as fit into a whole note can be, should be played in the measure of the whole note there. And of course, this would be 16 of them. But what if you were to do a smaller note value? Say a note value that already has a flag on it. And this is coming up in the Kazez book. So what if we were to put a slash over something that already has a flag? It would almost seem redundant, like, okay, we're putting 1/8 note into 1/8 note, which doesn't make any sense. And you're right, it doesn't make any sense because that's not the way that it's done. When that happens, when there is a flag on the prevailing note value, as well as the slash for the measured tremolo, you add the 2 things together. So you now have effectively 2 slashes in an 8th note, and that equals 2/16. Okay, so that's what that would refer to. That's what that would refer to. And I bring this up because this is going to come up in a few examples here in the Kazez. You're going to see something like this. 2 8th notes tied together and a slash on one of them. So what you will do is this 8th note will remain as normal. This one you will add the slashes and put them in. So this will refer to 2 16th notes. And this is just a shorthand way of doing this very, very common rhythmic figure, T-tiki. Okay. I think this is almost worse than useless. It actually makes things harder because we're so used to seeing this already. But it does exist, and so we need to know what they are. So pull out your Kazez books and go to page 52. Go to page 52 in your Kazez book, and let's begin on page 52 on number 90, where it says more challenging one-part exercises. We're not having to deal with the slashes yet. That'll be the next one. But this is in 5/4, and there are quite a lot of syncopations here. So you might want to do this a couple of extra times to make sure that you've got it. And there are a lot of dynamic changes, articulations, and things. Make sure that in the 3rd line, which is measure 10, that the percentage marker, remember that refers to repeating the previous measure. Okay, and this has a beat 5 anacrusis, a beat 5 pickup. I'll give you 4 subdivided measures and we'll be in. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. T, 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 T. Okay, so do that a couple more times if anything threw you off, to make sure that you feel comfortable with it. Now down to number 91. Take a quick scan through this. This is where this is going to come into play. Notice that there are slashes through here. If you look in the second line, measure 10, measure 12, measure 14, and the next line down, third line, you can see the slashes through quarter notes just as we expect, but you can see that there are a number of these figures here, and they happen on both sides of the beat, so here on the and here on the downbeat as well, so watch out for those. It's Adagio, so we'll take it a little slower. 1, 2, E and a 1, E and a 2, and T, 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 Tiki, T, Tiki, T, Tiki, Tiki, T, Tiki, T, T, Tiki, Tiki, T, Tiki, T, 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 Tiki, T, 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 Tiki, 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 T, Tiki, T, 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 Tiki, T, 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 Tiki, Tiki, T, 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 Tiki, T, 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 Tiki, T, 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 off, good. Sorry, I've been waving around randomly here. There are a bunch of gnats and flies in the classroom today. All right, let's do one more on page 53, number 92. Okay, this one, not too incredibly difficult because the note values are much longer, but you have to watch out for those because we have ties across bar lines, we have a lot of dots, we even have a double dot going across a line change, so watch out for that. Make sure you are keeping the beat, the prevailing beat, in your mind at all times. So I'll give you one subdivided measure in 5, and we'll be in 1, 2, E and a 3, 4 and 5. T, 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 T. Good. And when we meet next this coming Friday, we'll do some of the 2-part exercises and things like that, dealing with that. All right. Now to end our midweek remote lecture for today, let's do a few more PreHarmonic Dictation 2 examples. There will be 4 of them. Okay, again, you're going to need to turn these in. On last Friday's class, not a whole lot of you turned them in. This is what I'm using to determine if you attended the class and did the exercises. It's imperative. These are not optional, these midweek lectures. This is, we continue on through the Kazez, the Berkowitz, and all the other things, you know, even dealing with some new concepts through here. So these are required. But let's, so make sure you write them down on a piece of staff paper. You may, if you so desire, write them as part of, on the back of your homework or as part of your homework, or you can write it on a separate sheet of paper. Either one of those things are fine. So number 1 through 4, beginning, of course, as always, with bass clef, 4 spaces underneath. And again, we are still dealing with do in the bass, major chord in the space. Let's do 4 of these. We'll do 4 of these. Okay, and I will warn you, actually I will warn you now, heretofore I have done these with the bass line being fairly smooth or outlining a fairly standard or simple kind of harmonic mechanism, but now the bass line is going to start jumping, or it's going to start going to some more intervals that are not quite as smooth. Okay, so we're ramping it up just a bit. We're going to make the bass lines a little less smooth, but we're still dealing with only with the 4 chords that we know: major, minor, augmented, and diminished. Okay, I will play each one of these through twice. One of these through twice. And there will be 4 altogether. So here is number 1. Number 1. Ready, and. Number 1 again. Ready, go. And. Okay, let's move on to number 2. Number 2. Same statistics we begin with: bass clef, C major, 4 spaces, do in the bass, major in the space. Here we go. Ready, and. Again, and. Number 3, number 3. Beginning the same way. Here we go. Ready, and. Again. And. Okay, that one was maybe a little tougher. And let's do number 4, the 4th and final one for this remote lecture. Here we go, and. Again. All right, that's it for this remote lecture for week 7. We'll see you guys on Friday.